100 lectures personally that he gave. And I also, by his mercy, I was personally initiated by Srila Prabhupada in Detroit, Michigan in 1971, in July. I had joined in Hamilton, Ontario here, which is in the central part of Canada. And we first found out about Krishna consciousness in 1969 here in the city when the devotees from Buffalo, New York, Prabhupada was proliferating the movement back then, and they came and went on street Sankirtan. And at the time I was in a musical group, a very popular one back then. We were voted the #1 musical act for this area. And so I was out on the street and I met the devotees on the street and I had a confrontation with them. But at the same time, I got an opportunity to meet devotees. Philosophically, I wasn't in agreement with what they were saying, but at the same time, I got a chance to meet them, and that was certainly had an effect on me because association with the devotees is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. And then somehow or other, by circumstance, the devotees ended up coming to Hamilton through a friend of mine, Uttama Shloka. His name was Ron Marinelli. He was the lead guitarist in our band, an excellent player, by the way. Back then, we had gone to Ann Arbor, Michigan. We met a famous material guitar player named Jimi Hendrix. And so when we came back from Michigan, we started to play the Jimi Hendrix music for our audiences here in the Hamilton and Southern Ontario region. We will open for different bands like Steve Miller and Ted Nugent and a band from England called The Cream. So Ron was Uttama Shloka. He was a very good guitar player. So we started the temple in a band house we had. Hey, Balaram, back then you lived together. We were young men, but we rented a house, so we were practicing in the house. And then all of a sudden, Ron came to me and said, "Hey, the devotees are going to move to Hamilton and set up a temple. Can they use your house?" So I surrendered my house to them, and they took over the rent. I moved into Ron's apartment and lived separate for a while. And then by their association and his association, he was my friend at the time, I also decided to join the movement. I joined with a devotee. We had 18 Prabhupada disciples that were initiated by Prabhupada, joined in Hamilton, Canada. And so after 6 months, just jumping forward, I got recommended for first initiation. I was the temple commander in Hamilton. I used to clean the toilets and mop the floors. And we went on Sankirtan all day. Every day we went out. It was really difficult for me, Balaram, back then because I was really attached to having long hair. And I thought, geez, I can't shave my head. You know, I was a relatively famous person, you know, in this world, in my local area, and it was really embarrassing for me to shave my head. And then I thought, well, okay, I'll shave my head. And I shaved my head with a fellow Mahavir who became very famous in Brazil. He was the first one to go to South America and present Krishna consciousness to the people in that country. And then subsequently, but getting back, so then in July of that year, so we joined in January, so 6 months later in 71, I went to Detroit, and we went in a van. We had about, back then, everyone, we didn't have any vehicles really. So everybody would and we were young. We could accept all kinds of difficulty, just like young soldiers in the army. We could accept all kinds of difficulty. So we got in the truck. We drove down to Detroit to get initiation and to meet Srila Prabhupada for the first time. Wow, it was just so exciting, because back then we understood that the pure devotee is the via transparent media for Krishna. In other words, the pure devotee or a pure devotee completely surrenders himself to the service of the Supreme Lord and to his Guru. And in this way, he is the medium for Krishna consciousness. Like Prabhupada would sometimes say, he would have the devotees read his books to him. And he would love to hear them, because he would say that Krishna is speaking through me, that Krishna is explaining this transcendental science to others through the vehicle of this material body. Now, I can remember when we got to Detroit, we had to prepare for Prabhupada's visit. So we got there one day before, and then I was requested by the temple commander there to help them, because I was a temple commander in Hamilton and expert at cleaning the bathroom. I was expert at that. So I got requested to clean Prabhupada's bathroom in the apartment that they used for Prabhupada to stay in back then. So can you imagine, Balaram? I got the chance, as Bhakta Bob, I got the chance to personally clean Prabhupada's bathroom, and I took it as a great honor. And someone would think, oh, why would you do that? Why were you being a slave like that? But they didn't realize that even to clean the washroom of a pure devotee is the highest level of service you can probably get, because it's personal service. And there's an interesting result from that. I can still remember vividly doing it. I could still see the toilet bowl and scrubbing and cleaning and making it as good as I could for my spiritual master to be at the time. And as a result of that, I got invited to a private darshan in his quarters before the initiation ceremony the following day. And there was about 20 of us that were allowed in. Back then, it was hard to get in these private darshans. It was controlled by different people. You know what I mean? So it was like you had to be somebody. A Bhagawan back then was the temple president, by the way, Bhagawan Dasa, who went to Europe eventually. And I became a very good friend of his, actually. And I thought he gave a tremendous talk when he gave lectures, and he flew me to France for his Vyasa Puja after he became a fake ISKCON guru. So, but long story short, getting back, so we were in the room, in Prabhupada's room, And they brought in a big plate of prasadam for Prabhupada. You know, like super opulent. You know, the devotees really went out of their way to prepare prasadam for our guru. And we were all sitting there. Prabhupada spoke for a while. I can't remember what he said. It's, you know, it just passed away. I was so in shock to be in the room anyway. I was thinking, how the heck did I get in here? But somehow or other, because I cleaned his bathroom, I was given that courtesy to attend. And then the prasadam plate was in front of Prabhupada. It was a big assortment of different types of fruits and sabjis and sweets like that. And he took a little bit off the plates, just a little bit. And then he looked at all of us and he said, okay, please have some. And we all were frozen in time. Nobody really knew what to do. And so nobody got up to take any prasadam. Nobody. We just sat there frightened as we were in front. We all had that vivid. I think everyone there, I think it was Gopal Bhatta was there, and the president from Chicago and from Buffalo, and all these different devotees were there, and nobody moved. It was dead silence. And then Prabhupada looked at us and he said, you should never be shy when doing business and taking prasadam. And so we all stood up pretty much at the same time and proceeded towards the tray at the front of his desk. And we all got a chance to take some remnants from Srila Prabhupada. And that was my first experience to meet my spiritual master. I got his remnants. The next day I was initiated in the temple room on Jefferson Avenue back then. It was amazing. And it was like your place there, sort of I'm seeing in the picture. It was a house. So they had mounted Jagannath deities in the temple in the living room. The living room wasn't too big. It was maybe 400 or 500 feet. It was a mansion, so it was 400 or 500 feet. And in that room, there was a big altar they had put up, and they put the deities there. They had the Jagannath deities set up. And Prabhupada sat at the front of the room, and all of us went through the initiation ceremony. And when we got to, when Prabhupada got to me, I was just sitting in the crowd in the middle of the room, just crammed in. Everybody was like crammed in. There was no room. There must have been 150 devotees there. They would have shut us down if the police or the fire department came there, because it was totally against the rules of occupancy, local occupancy. So I still remember he called out my name was called out, Bobby Hebert. I was like, oh. And we had pink robes on made of polyester. Pink polyester dhotis. We didn't have dhotis. And so we just fabricated this type of thing. So I got up and sort of stumbled through, hey Prabhu, I stumbled through the crowd to get up to the front and get down and pay my obeisances. I basically knew that mantra, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. And then I stood up, and Prabhupada was looking at me. And then he said, "Your name is Visvakarma." So I'm looking at him. I had no idea who Visvakarma was. In fact, I couldn't even remember the name for 2 days. I'd never heard it. Remember, Prabhus, back then we had no books. There was no Srimad Bhagavatam. All we had was the Blue Gita from back then. That was it. And then we were getting some form of a Back to Godhead. And that was it. There were no books. We had some easy journeys. And there were gradually printing books from New York. It was the ISKCON Press in New York that was producing the books. There was no BBT at the time. So when Prabhupada announced my name, everybody was thrilled. They went like, "Oh," and they cheered, "Oh, oh, oh." And then Prabhupada noticed that, Prabhus, and he looked at me. He goes, "But you should never think," and then he's explaining to me, "that you're the chief engineer." That was the first indication of what the meaning of the name was to me. And I was Bhakta Bob from Hamilton, from Steel City here in Canada. So as a result, I call myself a Kali Yuga Steel City Vaishnava. So as a result, I looked at him and he goes, "You should never think you're the chief engineer, but you should think you're the servant of the servant of the servant of the chief engineer. In this way, you'll become great." So this is the business of the Vaishnava. So right from the first time that I met Prabhupada, he gave me the perfect instruction, which is an instruction for all of us, every one of us, for all the people in this program and around the world. We are all servants of the spiritual master. Just like Jayananda. Jayananda was a servant. I had a chance to associate with Jayananda on a limited basis years ago. When he was still alive, we started when I was president of the Toronto Temple, excuse me, with a Prabhu that joined from Windsor, Detroit, Devi Deva, we started the traveling Rath Yatra Sankirtan Bharti out of Toronto. And Jayananda was a friend of Devi Davis and a friend of our Vice President, Murli Krishna from Buffalo, who was a phenomenal devotee and followed in the footsteps of Jayananda. And his footsteps were that he was the humble servant of the servant of the servant of everyone. This is how you become a great devotee. Not by getting a position, an elected position, in some kind of hierarchy based on institutional practices for government approval to collect money. That's what institutions are. They get legal rights to collect money in their particular areas. In this way, they can function as such. So Prabhupada was present in his Vani, his Vapu incarnation for us. I'll explain another brief pastime. When I got my second initiation in New York City in 72. It was also in July, a year later. So the system was that you would go for 6 months. You had to chant your rounds, follow the 4 regulated principles, and you had to be surrendered. It wasn't just a formality that it was an actual commitment. And you had to demonstrate, Balaram, that commitment. You had to be surrendered. You had to get the recognition of the Godbrothers back then. They had to recommend you, and then you had to get approved. So somehow or other, I went another year. I kept chanting my rounds and following the principles seriously. I was a brahmachari, so I was complete from being a rock musician type of person, rock and blues. I became a Prabhupada servant, and then so I had to give up all association, and I did quite willingly, and I was quite proud of the fact back then that we were celibate. There was a great strength in celibacy, especially for a brahmachari. And so as a result, I got approved for initiation through Jagadish, who was the GBC back then, to get initiated by Prabhupada in New York City. So that we're in Toronto. Now, to go to New York City is an 8-hour truck ride, 10 hours. And so we piled in, we had 12 people. We piled into a van back then, and we drove to New York City. And there Prabhupada was. It was a grand occasion again. Wherever Prabhupada went back then, the devotees from all around that area would congregate, would come there to get the association of the pure devotee. So New York was quite exciting. I had been to New York prior. I went and bought a few years prior, I had bought a Gibson Hummingbird guitar. And I had friends there, so I went to New York. I saw Blood, Sweat, and Tears, a band in the Cafe Go-Go. They were a famous band back there, because I was, that kind of a person at the time. So I got to New York, and I was the last person to get initiated in the ceremony. Now, the ceremony was, Prabhupada, I had to wait in the hallway. There had been some trouble to get my approval through Bali Mardan. He was creating some kind of politics for me. But eventually it was recognized that the letter had been sent to Prabhupada. I was approved prior to showing up in New York. So I got in the room. Again, Prabhus. I got in the room. Now, this was a private darshan with Prabhupada where he was going to speak the Gayatri mantra in my right ear. So again, I came in the room, I bowed down and paid my obeisances. Now, the most important part of our process is to hear. So I still remember doing this, saying the pranams super clearly, because my mind was racing. So I thought the best thing I can do is just listen to the sound of the vibration of me paying obeisances. And so again, I repeated the pranams, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. And then I sat up in front of Prabhupada. It was extremely, nervous by the association and being in the room. But it was still a great moment in time for me, because there Prabhupada I was privately with Srila Prabhupada in his quarters. And he took the Gayatri mantra sheet. And first of all, he gave me he was trying to undo the Brahman's thread. I don't know, when you see the Brahmin threads, like, you know how they get entangled? Like this type of thing? They get entangled. And so when you undo them, sometimes they don't. Hey, Balaram, when you undo them, they get all messed up. And Prabhupada was trying to undo it, and it couldn't undo. And I thought, geez. So I'm sitting there like thinking I know something. It was ridiculous. I had never seen a Brahmin thread in my life, really. And then I offered to Prabhupada. I said, maybe I can undo it, Prabhupada. And I took it and tried to fumble through it. And somehow or other, Balaram, by mercy, I was able to undo the Brahmin thread and hand it back to him. There's 6 threads on it. So you have to hold it back, and then you hold it with both thumbs like that. So he took the Brahmin thread and put it around my neck. And then he had the Gayatri mantra printed out on a piece of paper. Okay, fair enough. So he hands me the piece of paper. So I take the piece of paper, and I think, okay, I guess that's it. It's over. Here, he put the thread on me. He gave me the piece of paper, and I'll just go. So I got down and paid my obeisances. And then he yelled at me. No, listen. I jumped up. Prabhupada said, here, sit beside me. And I sat beside him. He took the paper and the Gayatri mantra, and he pointed to the words, and then he spoke it into my right ear. And that was the correct thing, to hear from the spiritual master. That is our business. Shravanam Kirtanam, to hear from the lips of the pure devotee. So I'm going to go to the next section because I think my time's running out. And I have a lot of pastimes I can share with all of you. Being in India, in Mayapur festivals, and the purchase of the Toronto Temple. When I was the president, we bought the largest building in North America for him. And he came to Toronto and blessed us with his association. It's hard for me to even talk about it. I think I may get upset here on thinking about him. And when he left, it was such a tragedy for us. Extremely terrible. I can tell you one thing, Prabhus. When Prabhupada left us during his physical presence, every godbrother of mine was traumatized dramatically. Anybody that met Prabhupada or was initiated by him, Prabhupada meant the world to us. There was no one greater ever in the history of mankind than A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Prabhupada. No one. No Jimi Hendrix, no Michael Jackson, no Joe Biden, no Donald Trump, none of these idiots. They're all just mundane fools in a fool's paradise that live in this material world. There are 2 manifestations of our spiritual master. One is Vapu and the other Vani. Vapu means personal association, and Vani means through his words and instructions. He reasons ill, say that Vaishnavas die. When thou art living still in sound, the Vaishnava dies to live, and living tries to spread the holy name all around. He lives forever by his divine instructions, and his followers live with him. Prabhupada often told us it was better to serve him in separation to serve his mission, and not as a domestic servant, cooking, cleaning, and carrying his luggage. Those that did so often fell down due to familiarity. There is a saying, familiarity breeds contempt. To see your spiritual master as an ordinary human being is a great offense and destroys one's devotional creeper, sending the offender into a life of illusion and mental speculation. The false ego is a tiger of deceit for the aspiring student of spiritual life. The mouse becomes a tiger by the grace of the guru, and then he decides to let me eat my guru, and then the guru makes me a mouse again. It is a rare soul that can understand the position of the bona fide spiritual master. Those born into demoniac families may have trouble overcoming their deficiencies for understanding the transcendental science of Krishna consciousness from a bona fide spiritual master. Thus, so many devotees, even though they have taken initiation, have given up the process and position as surrendered disciples and therefore lost their spiritual connection with their guru, Prabhupada. Prabhupada was focused in producing a large volume of material instructions for his devotees in the event of his departure from the earthly plane. So it was a very calculated plan by him to give us all the instructions and insight into the spiritual world through his original, unadulterated books. He was always conscious of his mortality. He had suffered 2 heart attacks, severe heart attacks, on his initial journey to the West on the steamer Jaladuta. He understood the frailties of human existence, not like many of us. That is why he presented the Krishna books in the early 70s in case of an untimely departure. No one knows when we will die. He went on a marathon with his disciples to present the Chaitanya Charitamrita for humanity. He never wasted his time in trivial matters, but with great enthusiasm took up the order of his spiritual master to present Krishna consciousness to the Western-speaking countries. We are extremely blessed because of modern technology, which has made his Vani incarnation easily accessible to all of us who have the tools to gather his information left to us by his divine mercy. Just like this class today, we're able to speak to you in different parts of the world, like in our Prabhupada Disciples Association meetings every week. We have up to 50 people that attend the Bhagavatam class, the Srimad, the Chaitanya Charitamrita classes, and our Bhagavad Gita classes. With his grace, Yashodanandana Prabhu, it's so enlivening, by the way. And Yashodanandana Prabhu is so alive with Prabhupada memories that when you hear him speak, it's very inspiring. I must say that. There is no difference between the Guru and his instructions found in his books, lectures, letters, and morning walks. By assimilating his instructions and practicing them daily, as disciples, we become released from the bondage and bewilderment of material attachment and material existence. His work is a manifestation of his transcendental potency as the bona fide representative of Krishna. He is our Guru for all generations, for all time and place on this earth. As soon as one accepts Prabhupada as the bona fide spiritual master, he is at once given the opportunity to get out of the material confusion through his Vani incarnation. His global preaching success is a further demonstration of his transcendental position and potency, and he reveals his transcendental, non-dual message of Krishna consciousness to everyone. His message is at once bring the aspiring disciples like all of us here today and in the future to the level of real transcendental knowledge as soon as the disciple follows his instructions. He is delivered from the material ocean of repeated birth and death. Through strict following, the disciple can realize his guru is actually present through sound vibration, just like Prabhupada is present in his murti. We accept that. And he's present in his books. It's a sound incarnation of him. His Vani incarnation and sound vibration will live on into the future by his transcendental mercy for everyone's benefit who cares to listen. Prabhupada told us that anyone who reads his books and follows his instructions is initiated by him through transcendental mercy. There is a formality. We have a formal initiation process with the Prabhupada Disciples Association, and I can distribute that to anyone that wants it, how you can become qualified to be initiated as an authentic Prabhupada disciple. We do not concoct. We're following the program based on our training as temple presidents and Sankirtan leaders from when he was present with us. Prabhupada never mentioned in any of his books or lectures that you need a living guru for initiation. This is a spiritual science based on a transcendental connection with one's guru, which is beyond time and space. Like I tell Balaram, we've discussed over a period of time, it's the individual that gets initiated by his desire or her desire. And then there's a formal initiation and a name-giving ceremony and beads, etc. And in our particular case, we have the experience of Yashodanandana Prabhu, who Prabhupada wanted to conduct the fire sacrifice for the opening of the Bombay temple, as opposed to any other Brahmins or so-called devotees outside of the movement that would come in and do these ceremonies. That Yashoda was so appreciated by Prabhupada, and Prabhupada understood and even told him that he should stay in India because the people in the West would not be able to understand the information that he was delivering. So Yashoda is a very blessed soul, and we're fortunate to be working with him. He is the greatest welfare worker, Prabhupada, to save one from repeated birth and death, which is the greatest problem we all face. There is no question of attainment of Prabhupada's association in his Vapu incarnation, but by the attainment of transcendental knowledge through his Vani incarnation, his personal association is achieved. One can be in as a personal association by simply hearing from him constantly and participating in his Sankirtan work. The doubts of misconception of oneself and thousands of illusory contemplations will be erased by him. Guru also means heavy. You may ask, in what sense do you mean heavy? The weight of the words of truth weigh heavy on the deluded minds of the conditioned souls pursuing the path of material sense gratification. He has an uncompromising position declaring war on Maya for his disciples. This is a partial term meaning of the term heavy in relation to one's guru. There is no compromise between serving Krishna and serving Maya. When Prabhupada came to the West, he did not compromise in any way to satisfy the Western conception of living. So these changes of books, they've done that because they're compromising. He always presented himself as a perfect Vaishnava in dress, mannerism, and personal behavior. This was the standard he set, which attracted so many of us to take up a service. So you can see that Prabhupada always wanted us to shave our head. He said, yeah, if you want to be my disciples, you should shave your head. So you see all these devotees with beards and hair and all that. It looks ugly. It really does. And unfortunately, some people think it looks good, but they don't realize that this body is just a bag of stool, pus, and urine. And this so-called glorification of the material body is a big mistake. One of my god brothers has concocted an approach to Krishna consciousness, many of them based on compromise. His movement is called Krishna West, a complete concoction to justify his own spiritual position. We won't mention any names. Miseries enjoys company, they say. I dare say that if he personally told Prabhupada the ideas, he would have been severely chastised in Mayapur. Trust me. If you got called into the room and Prabhupada was there to present, you were there to present your idea. If it was not on, you got chastised. Look what happened to the road show in Mayapur. I was there in the meetings when we presented the whole thing, what Tamal Krishna was doing, how he was stealing all the devotees out of the temples. He was discouraging the grihastas. There was all kinds of trouble. And what did Prabhupada do to him? Balaram, he removed him. He removed him. I remember I couldn't believe it. And then he told him, go to China. And Tamal refused. He refused. So this is not the business of the Vaishnava, the true Prabhupada disciple. This is not the way it should be or was. So this is very important. People change the system. Grow your hair. Don't wear neck beads. When Bon Maharaj came to Toronto, I had a chance to come see him at Joe O'Connell's house. And Bon Maharaj was a member of the Gaudiya Math. We let him speak in the temple. And then when he started to speak, he started to show these symptoms of ecstasy. And when we were, this was on Gerrard Street. And when we, what happened was, when we saw him shedding these tears of ecstasy, we got up and left the temple room. We realized it was Sahaja. When we reported it to Prabhupada, he sent me a letter. He had Sat's Roof call me up as well. He asked me, did he have neck beads? No. Did he have tilak? The answer was no. Did he have a sika? The answer was no. Was he carrying, Prabhupada was asking these questions of me. Did he have a danda? No. Did you see japa beads? No. And then he sent me a letter. He said, do not associate with my god brothers. Do not. I tell all of my god brothers or all of my disciples, he specifies it. You can look it up online, Prabhus. Do not associate with my god brothers. That's the Gaudiya Math. Just know that. This is not a compromised environment here. The people that want to compromise, go ahead. That's your business. But in this particular group, we are Prabhupada disciples, period. We're not Ritviks. That's also a misunderstanding. People look at me, you're a Ritvik. I go, no, I'm Visvakarma Dasa, servant of the servant. I was told by Prabhupada that. I'm a Prabhupada disciple, and I follow his instructions. The Ritvik system is for initiation. We're not Ritviks. That's a derogatory term concocted by certain people to deride what we do. And these people are deviants. They are deviants. And there is corruption and chaos going on throughout the world because of their desire for patista, power, for profit, adoration, and distinction. This is nonsense. private bank accounts with millions of dollars in them, Balaram. Millions. You're a sannyasi and you've got millions of dollars in your bank account. You live in a fancy apartment somewhere. I've seen a review of one of these apartments in South Africa. The guy lives in a $500,000 here in Canada with a marble studio. It's like a palace. This is not the business of a renunciant, a sannyasi. So purity is the force, and Prabhupada's books are the basis of learning. His books are the law books for his disciples. One can feel the personal association of Prabhupada through daily focus on hearing from him, chanting japa, listening to lectures, bhajans, and reading his books only. This is his instruction to all of us. Being blessed with his personal association while he was here with us. But I still relish his association even more in his Vani incarnation today. I can concentrate better. He lives on, yes, in his sound incarnation, but one has to apply himself to get that understanding day after day, and this is the best use of time. Lord Chaitanya, everyone, has taught us that simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one can wash off at once the dust of the mirror of the mind, and then can eventually understand Prabhupada's transcendental presence in his Vani incarnation. By the grace of the Lord, pure devotee, one is raised to the platform of absolute knowledge, and then there is no more chance to become once again entangled in the forest of material darkness and illusion. After the appearance of Lord Krishna, Arjuna felt great remorse, but as soon as he remembered the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, he was once again reinstated in transcendental bliss. This is a lesson we should all follow as aspiring disciples and servants of Jagat Guru, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, because he will never die but live on in his books. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, is there a question period, or is that it? Balaramji, host of the program.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Visvakarma Guru, thank you so much for sharing such wonderful pastimes and the philosophy that Prabhupada, the teachings of Prabhupada they gave us. Anybody here have any questions? Okay. Does anybody online have any questions or comments to make about what Visvakarma Prabhu said? You can you hear me, right, Visvakarma Prabhu?
Ask them to raise their hand on Zoom.
No, they know.
Oh yeah, I can hear you. I got headphones on.
Mahatma, they know. No problem. Okay, so yeah, there are no questions or no comments.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for taking the time. Sorry, really. Apologies again for confusion.
I thought it was 11 a.m. my time. I had it written in my calendar.
Yeah,
but you know, that's all right. Better late than never.
Yeah, we disturbed your morning program.
Pardon?
We disturbed your morning program.
I'm okay. I'm flexible. I work 24 hours a day at this.
Jai.
Made no difference. Glories to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhus.
Jai. Visvakarma Prabhu ki
Haribol, good to see all of you.
Just before we go, I'll tell you the next class is a very important one, an interesting one by Nimai Pandit Prabhu of ISKCON Inc. And he's going to be talking about the specific topic of Varnashram Dharma and establishing college communities. And that's looking like pretty important for the future of ISKCON and our society. So tune in. That's at 5 p.m. local time, roughly 3.5 hours from now, right? Roughly. So hopefully see you all devotees there. Take care. Thank you so much again, Visvakarma Prabhu. All glories to
Hari
Shri
Bol for this.
Ki Jai. Hari Bol.
Yeah, you can end the meeting.
Yes.